Our lesson for today comes from the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, in the 4th chapter. And we know it as the parable of the sower. And I'm going to just read the parable as Jesus spoke it, and then we're going to look at the description, the explanation that he gave to his disciples. So the actual parable is verses 3 through 9. And Jesus said, "Listen, behold, a sower went out to sow. And it happened as he sowed that some of the seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. Some fell on stony ground where it did not have much earth, and immediately it sprang up because it had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some seed fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no crop. But other seed fell on good ground and yielded a crop that sprang up, increased, and produced, some 30-fold, some 60, and some 100. And he said to them, He who has ears to hear, let him hear." And then, as often happens, once the disciples got Jesus off to the side, they said, "Lord, can you explain this to us? Because we don't get it." And Jesus was not surprised. And he said, in effect, I speak in parables, and there will always be some people who don't get it, but because you're part of my inner circle, I'm going to explain it to you so that you can get it. Because if you don't understand this parable, how will you understand all others? So there's something within this parable that Jesus finds paramount, not only to their understanding of the parable, but to their ability to understand all parables. So it's a big one, it's an important one. We pick up in verse 13. And he said to them, 13's not on the screen. And he said to them, "Do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word. And these are the ones on the wayside where the word is sown. When they hear, Satan comes immediately and takes away the word that was sown in their hearts. And these are these likewise are the ones sown on stony ground, who when they hear the word immediately receive it with gladness, and they have no root in themselves, and so endure only for a time. Afterward, when tribulation or persecution arises for the word's sake, immediately they stumble. Now these are the ones sown among the thorns. They are the ones who hear the word, and the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things entering in choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. But these are the ones sown on good ground, those who hear the word, accept it, and bear fruit, some 30, some 60, and some 100-fold. I hear this parable taught and sometimes generalized in a lot of ways about many aspects of life, and that's not wrong. It's easy to take one teaching and apply it to many parts of life, and that's okay. But you have to be a little careful, because Jesus actually tells us exactly what he's talking about here. He says the sower sows the word. The word is the gospel. The word is Jesus. So what he's really trying to put forth here is that the sower will be the disciples, the people who know God, who know Jesus, who understand why Jesus came, and when they sow, what they're doing is they're spreading the word throughout the world about Jesus. That's what he's talking specifically about in this case. So he talks about different types of soil. And the analogy he's making is that the soil is the heart of the listener. Because the seed is the same in every case. If you know about how agriculture was done in the day, they didn't till rows and neatly plant seeds. They took a bag and hung it around their neck, and they reached in, they grabbed a handful of seed, and they threw it. We call it broadcast sowing. And you don't always get the seed to land exactly where you want it to land, so sometimes the seed would land on the wayside or the pathway beside the field. And this is a pathway that is packed hard. It's been trampled underfoot and under hoof and under wheel, and it's just as hard packed as you can imagine. Might as well be asphalt out here. And when that happens, Jesus says, the devil comes like a bird, snatches the seed and carries it away. So that the people whose heart is so hardened, the seed cannot take root at all, period. And the devil comes and steals it so that those people will not understand and will not receive salvation. It's a hard thing to hear. We all know people whose hearts are that hard that they, at this point, cannot receive their salvation. But don't give up hope yet. We'll come back to that. The next is the seed that lands on stony ground. Okay? So the seed has a crack or a crevice that it can fall into, or maybe there's a little bit of moisture and maybe a little bit of soil, and it's able to sprout. In other words, the word of the Lord, the news of Jesus, the gospel, the good news, is able to take root in their hearts. But it's stony. And so as the seedling springs up, the wind batters it against the sharp edges of the stone, the sun comes and beats down on it and tries to dry it out, and because there's no real depth to the soil underneath for the roots to reach down and drink of the earth, the plant withers. It cannot mature into something that will produce fruit. And then there's the seed that lands among the thorns and the weeds. And the soil is there. It's able to support the life of the thorn bushes and the weeds, but the thorns are so thick that the plant is unable to rise up through it enough to produce fruit. These are people whose hearts receive the word, and they're full of joy because of it. They understand it, and they grasp a hold of it, and they receive their salvation. But then the cares of the world, the thorns of the bushes, and the deceitfulness of sin, and the desires of the flesh, and the desires of the heart, they get in the way. They try to reach up towards the sun, and they can't quite get there because they're always distracted by their flesh. They're distracted by the worries of the world, the terrible news of what's going on in other places of the world. They can't get there. They can't focus enough on the sun to be able to produce fruit. And there's a whole lot of those in the world today. We are bombarded like no other generation in the history of mankind with too much information about what's going on in the world. We are bombarded like no other generation with visual images of ungodly behavior, which is why we have to continue to fight for our children, because if we see it, so do they. I tell you, there are billboards along the highway and in the cities that I wouldn't want my kids to see. There are TV shows that should not be on regular television. They show too much. The cares of the world, the lust of the flesh, get in the way of being able to be fruitful in the work of the Lord. And then there's the seed that grows on good ground, a heart that's been prepared to receive, a heart that's been nurtured as it was growing up to be good and loving and kind. And that heart hears of the compassion of the Lord. That heart hears of the love that God has for us, loving us so much he was willing to sacrifice his only son. And that heart, that good ground, grows a plant that is tall and strong and fruitful. A plant that starts from one seed and produces hundreds more. An average stalk of corn has 1 or 2 ears, but each one of those ears has hundreds of seeds on it. An apple tree, starting from one apple, in its lifetime, if it's planted in good soil and cared for, will produce thousands of apples, and each of those apples has multiple seeds in it. That's a productive plant, planted in good soil. And that's what Jesus wants us to be. He wants us to be the kind of plant, the kind of tree that has a good heart. Has a heart that can take the love of God and multiply it and let it shine outward to our fellow man. And when that happens, we are fruitful in that we bring other people into the world of those who know and love God. When we show up in support of our neighbors who are in need, and people see that and they know that we're doing it because we are Christian, it bears fruit. And just the opposite, when our neighbors are in need and we don't show up and they know that we call ourselves Christians, they wonder, why am I getting any help? Why isn't that person who's supposed to be a Christian helping their neighbor? And that withered fruit is producing no seed. These are hard lessons sometimes. It is so easy to see the withered fruit in other people and not in ourselves. It takes some effort to look inward at our own heart, at our own ground. Say, is this good ground, or is it a little stony? Is it a little thorny? Is it a little too hard for the root to penetrate? The good news is the condition of the heart is not permanent. Hard soil can be made good. You could take soil that is packed hard as stone, and you can till it up, you can work in compost, you can work in manure, you can work in organic matter, and over time that can become good soil. It doesn't have to stay hard-packed soil. Stones can be removed. There are places in this world where if people wanted to farm, they had to remove a lot of rocks from their fields before they could do much good farming. It's slow work, it's tedious work, it's backbreaking work, but it can be done. Thorn bushes and weeds can be removed, giving room for the good crop to grow up. And what that equates to in us is that hearts can be changed. A stony heart doesn't have to remain stony. In Ezekiel chapter 36, verse 26, the Lord told the children of Israel through the prophet Ezekiel, "A new heart also I will give you, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you a heart of flesh." So if you know someone whose heart is hardened, whose heart is stony, whose heart is full of thorns, don't give up on them. God can change them. And make no mistake about it, it is God's job to change hearts, not yours. You can help by being a good friend. You can help by loving them. You can help by providing good examples and testimonies of what God has done in your life. But ultimately, it is the Lord's job to fix their hearts, to remove the heart of stone and replace it with a heart of flesh. And if you're looking at yourself and you're thinking, I don't know what I can do about all those thorns in my heart, ask the Lord to help. He's a wonderful gardener. He really is. He's a master at it. If you're thinking, I've done too much bad, I've trampled my heart into a hardened path that nothing can grow on. That's what the enemy wants you to believe. The truth is, God can fix it. And if you're praying for someone whose heart is hardened or stony, don't give up. Sometimes it takes time. Probably all talked to someone who came to the Lord later in life, and their testimony is that the whole time their mother or their grandmother or their uncle or their child was praying for them continuously. God hears his continuous prayers. Don't assume that a heart has to stay in the condition it's in, because it doesn't. If you were stuck, if you were trapped, then it wouldn't be good news. It wouldn't be the gospel of Jesus. Every head bowed. If there's anyone here today who has never submitted their heart to Jesus for healing, who has never said, Lord, I need you. Tired of living this life the way the world wants me to live. I'm tired of being stony, thorny, of being unable to grow good things. Today is the perfect day to come forward and receive your gift of salvation. If you're watching online and you can't come forward, that's okay. God hears you wherever you're at, any time of the day or night. Open your heart. Open your voice and call the name of Jesus. I promise you, he will hear and he will respond. Amen. Let us give thanks to the Lord for all that he has done for us by giving back a portion in our tithes and offerings.